Hello, history enthusiasts, and welcome to History Love, the channel where the past comes alive. Here, we dive deep into the fascinating stories, pivotal events, and remarkable figures that have shaped our world. So, sit back, relax, and join us as we journey through time and bring history to life. The history of Norway. Prehistory. The land of ice and fire. Our story begins over 10,000 years ago when the glaciers of the last ice age retreated, unveiling Norway's rugged terrain of fjords, mountains, and forests. The first human settlers, drawn by the promise of fertile coasts and abundant game, arrived around 8000 BC. Stone Age. Early communities thrived on hunting, fishing, and gathering, leaving behind tools, rock carvings, and burial sites that whisper tales of survival and adaptation. Coastal settlements like those in Son and Hordaland reveal how these ancient Norwegians mastered the sea early on, crafting boats to navigate the labyrinthine fjords. Bronze and Iron Ages. By 2000 BC, the Bronze Age brought new technologies and trade. Intricate bronze artifacts suggest connections to distant lands, while petroglyphs depict ships, warriors, and religious rituals. The Iron Age, 500 BC AD 800, ushered in fortified villages and a hierarchical society, laying the groundwork for the Viking Age. The Viking Age, 800-1050, raiders, explorers, and kings. The Viking Age catapulted Norway onto the global stage as daring seafarers set sail to raid, trade, and explore. Norwegian Vikings were intrepid adventurers, sailing westward to colonize the Shetland and Orkney Islands, Iceland, and Greenland. Some even reached North America, centuries before Columbus. Warriors and chieftains. In Norway, Viking society was organized around powerful chieftains who vied for dominance. These leaders not only waged war abroad but also consolidated power at home, setting the stage for the unification of the Norwegian kingdom. Harald Fairhair and unification. Legend tells of Harald Fairhair, the first king to unite Norway around AD 872 after his victory at the Battle of Hafrsfjord. This unification created a nascent kingdom, though it was often fragmented by rival clans and regional disputes. Christianization. The Viking Age also saw Norway's gradual conversion to Christianity. Kings like Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf II, Saint Olaf, used both the sword and the gospel to bring the new faith to their people. By the early 11th century, Norway was firmly part of Christendom, marking the end of the Viking Age but not the spirit of its adventurous people. Middle Ages, 1050 to 1537, prosperity, plague, and political struggles. With the close of the Viking Age, Norway entered the medieval period, a time of nation-building, cultural flourishing, and devastating hardships. The High Middle Ages, 1050 to 1350, a golden era. The 12th and 13th centuries marked a golden era for Norway. Trade flourished as merchants exported timber, fish, and dried cod to Europe. Cities like Bergen became bustling hubs, and the Hanseatic League strengthened Norway's ties to the continent. Culturally, the Middle Ages were a time of architectural and literary growth. Stave churches dotted the countryside, and epic sagas immortalized the deeds of kings and heroes. The Gulating and Frostating, early legal assemblies, underscored Norway's evolving governance. The Black Death, 1349, a nation in crisis. Disaster struck in 1349 when the Black Death ravaged Norway, killing nearly half the population. The demographic collapse devastated the economy, leaving rural communities abandoned and nobles struggling to maintain control. Norway's weakened state left it vulnerable to foreign influence. Union with Denmark, 1537 to 1814. The puppet state and absolute monarchy. The puppet state era, Lydriketiden, subjugation under Denmark. In 1380, Norway entered into a personal union with Denmark, and by 1537, the kingdom was reduced to a puppet state under Danish rule. The centralization of power in Copenhagen marked the end of Norway's independence. During this era, Norway's role in the Union was primarily that of a resource supplier. Danish nobles and administrators governed the land, and Norwegian culture and language were overshadowed by Danish influence. Despite this, Norway retained its identity through folklore, traditions, and a resilient peasantry. The absolute monarchy era, Enevoldstiden, the tightening grip. The 17th century brought the era of absolute monarchy. Denmark-Norway was ruled by an all-powerful king, and Norwegian autonomy dwindled further. Heavy taxation and conscription burdened the population, especially as Denmark-Norway engaged in costly wars. Despite these challenges, Norway saw some development during this period. Timber exports, driven by Europe's growing demand, became a cornerstone of the economy. Lutheranism, established after the Reformation, also took root, shaping Norway's religious and cultural identity. From its prehistoric roots in ice and fire to the bold seafaring spirit of the Viking Age, the sagas of Norway resonate with tales of resilience and reinvention. Even under the shadow of foreign rule, the Norwegians maintained their identity, laying the groundwork for their eventual independence and resurgence as a proud, sovereign nation. Union with Sweden, 1814 to 1905. The state of the officials. After the Napoleonic Wars, Norway's journey toward independence took a detour. The Treaty of Kiel, 1814, forced Denmark to cede Norway to Sweden. However, Norwegians, unwilling to submit entirely, declared independence and adopted their own constitution at Eidsvoll in May 1814. The state of the officials, Embetsmannsstaten, governance under Swedish influence. Although Norway was forced into a union with Sweden later in 1814, it retained significant autonomy through its constitution. This period was dominated by the Embetsmen, a powerful elite of civil servants and officials who managed the country's governance. The officials upheld the constitution but were closely aligned with Swedish interests. This era was marked by economic stagnation and growing frustration among the Norwegian populace, who felt the union curtailed their national sovereignty. However, it was also a time when Norwegian culture and nationalism began to flourish, with figures like playwright Henrik Ibsen and composer Edvard Grieg spearheading a cultural renaissance. The last decades of the Union, 1870 to 1905, a push for independence. By the late 19th century, growing political and economic tensions strained the Union. Norway's rising middle class sought more autonomy, demanding control over its own foreign policy and greater representation in governance. Parliamentary rule and nationalism. The introduction of parliamentary rule in 1884 shifted power from the Embetsmen to elected representatives, fueling a wave of nationalism. The Norwegian parliament, Storting, became a platform for pushing independence, and the refusal of Swedish concessions only deepened the divide. The road to independence. The breaking point came over a disagreement about Norway's desire to establish its own consular service. When Sweden refused, Norway unilaterally dissolved the Union in 1905. A peaceful resolution followed, and a referendum confirmed the decision. Norway invited Prince Karl of Denmark to become King Haakon VII, symbolizing its full independence. Independence, 1905 to 1940. Building a modern nation. Norway entered the 20th century as a newly sovereign nation. Though small and economically reliant on industries like fishing, timber, and shipping, the country embraced modernization and democracy. A neutral nation, Norway adopted a policy of neutrality during World War I, 1914 to 1918. While spared the devastation of war, the conflict strained the economy due to disruptions in trade. However, the post-war years brought industrial growth, particularly in hydroelectric power, laying the foundation for Norway's future prosperity. World War II, 1940 to 1945, occupation and resistance. Norway's neutrality was shattered on April 9, 1940, when Nazi Germany invaded the country. Strategic ports and Norway's long coastline made it a critical target in Hitler's war strategy. The occupation. The German occupation was brutal, lasting 5 years. King Haakon VII and the Norwegian government fled to Britain, where they directed resistance efforts from exile. In Norway, a network of resistance fighters, known as the Hjemmefronten, sabotaged German operations and provided intelligence to the Allies. Heroic efforts and liberation. One of the most notable acts of resistance was the sabotage of the Nazi nuclear program at Vemork, which prevented Germany from developing atomic weapons. By May 1945, with Germany's surrender, Norway was liberated. King Haakon VII returned to a nation united by shared suffering and resilience. Post-war Norway. Rebuilding and prosperity. After the war, Norway embarked on a journey of recovery and modernization, transforming itself into one of the world's most prosperous nations. Joining the international community. In 1949, Norway abandoned its neutrality and became a founding member of NATO, aligning itself with the Western Bloc during the Cold War. Its foreign policy emphasized peacekeeping and human rights, with Norway playing a key role in mediating international conflicts. Economic growth and the oil boom. The discovery of oil and gas in the North Sea in the 1960s revolutionized Norway's economy. Wealth from these resources was managed prudently, with the creation of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund ensuring long-term stability. The welfare state. Post-war Norway also prioritized social welfare, creating one of the world's most comprehensive welfare systems. Universal healthcare, free education, and robust social safety nets became hallmarks of Norwegian society. From the constraints of the Swedish Union to the hardships of World War II and the triumphs of post-war reconstruction, Norway's story is one of perseverance and pride. Its journey from subjugation to independence, from struggle to prosperity, reflects a nation's determination to chart its own destiny. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, keep the love for history alive.